Well, joining me live now is former Australian Ambassador to Israel, Senator Dave Sharma. Dave, great to see you. I don't want to ask you to comment directly on American politics, of course, but this does show the split in America, doesn't it, about what Donald Trump should and shouldn't do, according to his base. I mean, he came into office for a second time, promising really to remove America from these overseas wars, wanting to end these wars. Now he's on the brink of entering another one.
Look, I've followed that debate. I would just say I think some of those divisions are more exaggerated than real. I mean, I don't think, obviously, the United States has not taken a decision, but I do not think the United States is contemplating a campaign like in Iraq or Afghanistan in the early 2000s. I think they're contemplating a series of quite limited operations and strikes targeted against particular Iranian facilities, particularly the Fordow nuclear enrichment plant. In a way that I don't think would entangle the United States in another conflict. Now, I don't know what they have in mind. I don't know what the options are they're contemplating, but everything I've seen seems to suggest that it would be a very limited operation.
Yeah, I agree with you on that, Dave. But what I think we see among the MAGA crew and now the divisions among the Conservatives is they see parallels to what happened in Iraq, weapons of mass destruction. That has been described again when it comes to Iran's nuclear program. But the difference was that war was justified in part as a hunt for, one man, Osama bin Laden, who was behind the 9/11 attacks. Is this where it's different and therefore doesn't require boots on the ground and therefore a drawn-out conflict?
Well, look, I mean, I would just point out in Trump's first administration, so in 2020, he authorised and conducted a strike against Qasem Soleimani, who was the commander of the Quds Force within the IRGC. As far as I can tell, his base didn't erupt then, and no one thought he was embroiling the United States in another conflict. And as I said, I would expect, if anything happens, this would be a limited operation. But I also know that President Trump is holding out the prospect of a return to negotiations. And part of him putting military options on the table is to extract or impose greater leverage over Iran and try to encourage them to contemplate things that, frankly, they were not prepared to contemplate during the most recent round of negotiations. So giving up their nuclear enrichment program, curtailing their ballistic missile program, stopping their support to armed terrorist groups in the region.
Yeah, the nuclear program is one thing, but Israel is saying that they want regime change there. But who would be ready to take over from the regime? And do you think that is it all possible?
Well, I don't think that is or should be a goal of this. I mean, who the Iranian people choose to lead them and their former government is for them. And I think we should have learnt, at least from Iraq and Afghanistan, that the attempts by outsiders to impose a new regime are destined to fail. This can only happen organically, like it did in Syria. Now, what would take the place, though, I really don't know. And I've seen, I think there's a lot of nervousness amongst the Iranian people that, what might take the place might well be a more extreme or a more hardline version of the Islamic Republic that exists right now. And I understand those concerns. And I think that's why we shouldn't attempt to influence that at all. I mean, what we should be looking after through negotiations or otherwise is our legitimate security concerns about Iran's nuclear program.
Okay, but this is just the latest reason for that exchange of ballistic missiles between Israel and Iran. Of course, this round of conflict is because that nuclear program Israel deemed was getting very close to a dangerous level of success. But a couple of months ago, it was for a different reason. I mean, when we look at the conflict in Gaza, in the Middle East more broadly, involving Lebanon, involving Hezbollah, involving Iran, what can we say is Israel's endgame here? We know they want to see regime change in Iran. That's not going to happen quickly. So should we expect this ongoing intermittent flare-ups for quite some time?
Well, look, I don't think the goal of Israel's military operation is regime change. I know that Prime Minister Netanyahu has urged the Iranian people to rise up, but I don't think that is their goal. And I think you quite cleverly highlighted all those conflicts before and what ties them together, whether it was Hamas in Gaza mounting the 7th of October terrorist attacks Hezbollah in southern Lebanon, the Houthis in Yemen, has been Iranian influence, support and capacity building. And what changed after the 7th of October 2023, to my mind, was that Israel recognised that their military concept or strategy had failed. That was a concept that was tied around deterrence and containment, and they believed that they could deter and contain Hamas and Hezbollah and the Houthis and ultimately Iran as well. Now, having lost, 1,200 of their citizens and having had 250 people kidnapped, they simply said, we're not prepared to tolerate a regime that is committed to our destruction, that will support terrorist attacks again, like the ones Hamas conducted on the 7th of October. We need to address the source of this threat. And that, I think fundamentally that's what's changed since the 7th of October 2023, that has largely remade the map of the Middle East.
When you talk about regime change and Netanyahu in particular, I mean, you can go back not too far, maybe just over a decade, where Netanyahu was on the record as supporting Hamas to take over the Gaza Strip because they were the the best option at the time. So, there's lessons from history here, isn't it? You advocate for regime change, but that doesn't always work out so well.
No, I agree. Firstly, I dispute that characterisation of Prime Minister Netanyahu's attitude towards Hamas. But obviously, I'm not.
Can you shed some light on that? Because yes, when you've got hindsight history, often things are skewed and they're out of context. But there are quotes on the record where he was, at least vaguely supportive of Hamas.
Hamas took power in an internal coup in Gaza, ousted the Palestinian Authority in 2005. Israel had nothing to do with that. They conducted an internal coup. But Israel recognised it was in our interest to make sure that the people in Gaza were not starving, that they had livelihoods. And so, yes, they cooperated with Qatar and with others to make sure assistance went to the people of Hamas. I mean, they gave thousands of Gazans work permits every day to come into Israel and to earn money and to send it back. They let through hundreds of trucks each day with humanitarian assistance, with a view that, if the people in Gaza had a stake, and if Hamas had a stake in the welfare of the people of Gaza, they would not be committed to Israel's destruction. Now, clearly, that was a mistaken calculation, and we are where we are now, with Hamas having used a lot of that aid to rebuild or build their own military capabilities, conduct the terrorist attacks that they did. But look, I don't think Israel is interested in. I mean, sure, would they welcome a new form of government in Iran? Yes. But I think their main interest here is they want a government of Iran, however constituted, that is not committed to their destruction and that does not invest, millions and millions of dollars in building a nuclear enrichment program, which can only be used for weapons. The level of enrichment we're talking about is only feasible for military use, which supports and foments and creates armed terrorist groups in the region, which creates instability. I think they want to be allowed to live in peace in their neighbourhood, and whatever form of Iranian government allows them to do that, I think they would welcome.